좋은 아침입니다. Unfortunately, those are the last words that you will hear from my mouth of your beautiful language, and I apologize for that. You're all very proud of the economic miracle of the Han River, and justly so. But in the next 24 minutes, I'd like to try and convince you that we need more than economic leadership from you. The world needs Korea to show us how not to build a strong economy, but to reinvent civilization for a whole new age. And those of you who are watching this show, to continue the conversation, my Twitter name is @Tapscott. Let me begin. Some of you may know a book I wrote called Wikinomics, and Wikinomics was about the corporation. And it argued that the internet is not about websites or .coms or eyeballs or stickiness or clicks or page views. It's a new global computational platform that enables us all to collaborate. And that's leading to a change in the deep structure and architecture of the corporation, of how we innovate and create goods and services, and how companies engage with the rest of the world, because talent can now be outside our boundaries. Well, the book was a success, and I was very pleased with that, and then something happened. We saw the meltdown of the financial services industry. Who would have imagined 4 years ago that one of the themes of business books today would be how to save capitalism, or is capitalism even savable? And these books are not being written by Occupy Wall Street types, they're being written by the capitalists. Many economists today say that when you have the meltdown of a financial industry, you move into a prolonged decade of slump. And we should get ready for ugliness in the global economy for decades. Well, I have a slightly different view. My view is that the future is not something to be predicted. The future is something to be achieved. And we can achieve a very different future in Korea and in the world. But to do that, we're going to need to understand what the problem is. And this is critical for you because, of course, economically, you've been very successful. But no company, no country, no region can succeed in a world that's failing. And the world is broken. We need to rebuild and reboot most of our institutions for a whole new networked age. And that's the theme of my new work. It's called Macrowikinomics. I'm convinced that this is not just the aftermath of recession. This is not a business cycle. This is a secular change. This is a sea change, a punctuation point in human history. You look around the world today, many of the institutions of the industrial age that have served us well for decades or even centuries have now come to the end of their life cycle. Capitalism and industrial capitalism as the model has finally run out of gas. Take the auto industry. Well, America's greatest company was General Motors. It went bankrupt. You had something to do with that. The financial system in Wall Street almost brought down global capitalism, but it hasn't changed. Newspapers everywhere are declining and going bankrupt. 70 newspapers in the United States have gone bankrupt. Our models of education are industrial age models. In the industrial age, it was all about something at the top, selling, pushing down standardized products, pushing down newspapers, broadcasts, products and services, lectures. And the recipients were passive. They were inert. So the educational model is, I'm a teacher, I have knowledge, you're a student, you don't have knowledge. Get ready, here it comes. It's a teacher-focused, one-way, one-size-fits-all model where the student is isolated in the learning process. Well, we can now rebuild all of these institutions, not just our core economy, but civilization, around a new communications medium and around a new model. And if you want to know what's happening today, you don't go back to 1991 or 1982. You need to go back a few hundred years in history. All around the world, including in Korea, there was an agrarian economy. The political system was originally dynasties and slavery, and that was the means of production. And then it became feudalism. But knowledge was tightly concentrated in tiny handfuls of oligarchs and of the church. And along came Johannes Gutenberg with his great invention, the printing press, and over time, people began to acquire knowledge. And the institutions of feudal agrarian economy appeared to be stalled or frozen or in atrophy. It didn't make sense for the dynasty or the church to be responsible for medicine when people had knowledge. So we had the rise of new forms of government, a corporation, science, the university, eventually the Industrial Revolution, and it was all good. But it came with a cost. And now once again, the economic genie is out of the bottle. The internet, only this time it's very different. The printing press gave us access to the written word. The internet enables each of us to be a publisher. The printing press gave us access to information and knowledge that was recorded. The internet gives us more than that. It gives us access to the intelligence contained in the crania of other people on a global basis. This is not an information age that we're entering into. It's an age of networked intelligence. Now, why is this happening? 4 big drivers. The first is technology, and you've heard about it at this conference. I don't need to explain. The so-called Web 2.0. This is very different than the internet of the dot-com period. It's mobile, it's broadband, it intersects with the physical world, and it's true multimedia. Secondly, we have a demographic revolution. We have today the first generation to grow up digital, to come of age in the digital age. I started studying children about 15 years ago when I noticed how my own children were effortlessly able to use all this sophisticated technology. And at first I thought, my children are brilliant, they're geniuses, they're prodigies. And then I noticed that all their friends were like them, so that was a bad theory. So I started working with about 300 kids, and I wrote this book in 1997. Well, flash forward to today. They're not just growing up digital, they've grown up. They're coming into the workforce, the marketplace, and into society. And there's no more powerful force to change every institution of civilization than the first generation of digital natives. I'm a digital immigrant. I had to learn the language. Now, the defining characteristic of this generation is the net generation. You notice this cartoon? It didn't get a laugh at all. This is a cartoon from my book 15 years ago. And back then, everyone used to just think, oh, that's so funny, a baby using a computer. Now everyone looks at the cartoon and they say, what's that weird computer? Why isn't he using an iPad? So time online for these kids growing up is taken away from television. And they have brains that are different than their parents. And this is the first time in human history when children are an authority about something really important. I was an authority on model trains when I was 11 years old. Today, the 11-year-old at the breakfast table is an authority on the digital revolution that's changing business, commerce, learning, publishing, every institution in society. Rather than a generation gap, we have what I called a generation lap, where kids are lapping their parents on the digital track. And if you have a teenager in your house, you know what I'm talking about. Who does the systems administration in your home? So this is creating an extraordinary time in history. This is a panel of youngsters I interviewed in front of a big audience, 6,000, 7,000 people. On the left there is a young woman named Rahaf Harfouche studying in Paris. Her boyfriend is in Toronto. They turn on video Skype all day to keep their relationship going. They cook together across the Atlantic Ocean. I asked her, does your generation use email? She said, oh no, email is yesterday's technology. I said, well, if you do use email, what would you use it for? She says, email is sort of like a formal technology, say for sending a thank you letter to one of your friend's parents. That would be a good use of email. 2 down from her is Sherry Kong, a 20-year-old student hired by the government of New Zealand, along with 80 other students. Their job? to teach the teachers how to use the internet in the classroom. I asked her, so Sherry, what are the teachers like as students? She says, the teachers, they're awful students. They talk in class, they don't do their homework. It's terrible. And beside them is Michael Furtick. He was 28 at the time. I've known Michael since he was 13, when he was the project manager on my website, growingupdigital.com. They made him the project manager as a 13-year-old because he was the oldest and most experienced. There was a 7-year-old systems engineer on the team. When Michael was 15, he sold his own website for an undisclosed 7 or 8 figure US dollar sum. So he's a wealthy 15-year-old. One of the news reports said it was only $1 million, and I sent him an email and said, Michael, you sold it for $1 million. You should have called me. And he wrote back and he said, Don, legally I can't tell you how much I sold it for, but I can tell you I'm very happy. And he didn't want the money to buy a Ferrari, although he bought a cheap little car, but his mother had to drive around with him because he only had his learner's permit. He wanted the money to invest in his next new venture. It's called takingitglobal.org. Millions of young people on a social network of kids who want to change the world. I studied 11,000 kids in 10 countries. This is the first ever global generation. And in this room, many of you are part of it. You're different from all previous generations, and you give me great hope for the future because you have a culture of collaboration, of innovation, of speed, and of integrity. And that's the new culture of work, and it's the new culture of the market. Now, thirdly, there's a social revolution. And it's not just there are close to 1 billion people now on Facebook, or this is a heat map of articles on Wikipedia written in the Arabic language. This is a heat map of articles in Wikipedia written in the English language. People can now self-organize. They can participate in the economy. Social networking is becoming social production. The internet is not about websites, it's a new means of production. And it's changing the way we get capability in society. So this is an example. It was 5 years ago. I gave my son Alex an advanced copy of Wikinomics for Christmas. I gave him some other things for Christmas too. But he said, I think I'll create a community on Facebook. I said, can I watch? 15 minutes later, he has the Wikinomics community. Another 15 minutes later, he has 6 members. By the time we're eating Christmas dinner, he's got 130 members in 7 countries, 7 regional coordinators, a president, secretary, and chief information officer. He's created a PDF of the first 2 chapters of the book. Before I'm eating Christmas dinner, I have kids writing in saying, Mr. Tapscott, we found errors in your book. And the community is placing demands on me. One of them says, how is Mr. Tapscott going to be contributing to our community? What is this? 2 words, self-organization. Self-organization has been around throughout human history, but it can now, what used to take millennia, can happen overnight. Another humbling story, I got an email 5 years ago, someone saying, there's a guy named Obama who's trying to run for president, and he thinks your book is the key to winning the presidency and transforming America. Go to myBarackObama.com, and there's my book. Right on the screen. It says, we believe in the internet and the book Wikinomics. And he says, I'm asking you to believe not just in my ability to bring about change in Washington, I'm asking you to believe in yours. And I looked at this and well, my first reaction was, I am the man. But not so fast, because I'm not the man. There's a Wikinomics community, but there's also a single moms for daycare for Obama. And there's a young firefighters for Obama. He created a community that built a platform whereby 35,000 other communities self-organized. And the final big change is a change to the deep structure and architecture of the corporation. Throughout the 20th century and the industrial age, we created wealth through vertically integrated companies because the cost of transactions and collaboration in an open market was prohibitive. I wrote a book a couple of decades ago called Paradigm Shift, and I said, no, the boundaries of a corporation are becoming more porous. Then we saw the rise of the internet, and that further dropped transaction and collaboration costs, where companies began to unbundle into networks. And now peers can come together and create value. They can create an encyclopedia. They can create a computer operating system called Linux. The Chinese motorcycle industry is dozens of little companies that all work together. There's no Harley Davidson. There's no Yamaha. There's no company pulling all the strings. And this is now 40% of global motorcycle production. So this guy named Rob McEwen, he's a friend of mine actually, took over a gold mine and his geologist couldn't tell him where the gold was. So after a few years, he's so frustrated he's ready to give up. But he has a radical thought. He wonders, if my geologists don't know where the gold is, maybe somebody else does. So he takes his geological data, he publishes it, and holds a contest on the internet called the Goldcorp Challenge. He asked the world, $500,000 in prize money for anybody who can tell me, do I have any gold? And if so, where is it? He gets 77 submissions from all around the world. They use techniques that he's never heard of, and for his $500,000 in prize money, Rob McEwen finds $3.4 billion worth of gold. The market value of his company goes from $19 million to $10 billion, like that. Goldcorp today is worth $36 billion. And I can tell you, because he's my friend, he's a happy camper. He thought differently about how you get capability. So you put those together and you add one other thing, the global mess that we're all in. A burning platform means that the costs of staying where you are become greater than the costs of moving somewhere else. And this is the challenge for Korea. You don't have a burning platform within the country, but you're in a world that's on fire. And we need to rebuild all kinds of institutions if we're going to be able to move forward. Now, each of these is a 1-hour speech, and unless you have 16 hours, I won't go through it all. But I'd like to pick up just a couple of examples. Korea's been so successful in the auto industry, so let's start with the corporation. Well, this guy's building an auto company. He has 5,000 designers, but they're not inside his boundaries. They're on the internet. He doesn't have a 3 million square foot manufacturing plant. He has 30 local plants across the US, hiring local people, building customized cars for local geographies. That's why the company is called Local Motors. The cars are just coming out onto the marketplace. Is this a radical new model for Hyundai and Kia and so on to reinvent what is an automobile and how it gets built? How about newspapers? Is the Huffington Post the next model to replace the New York Times? I'm not so sure. We need to have balance. We need to have good journalism. We need to pay journalists. We need to create a world where we're not all in these little self-reinforcing echo chambers, where the purpose of information is not to inform us, but is to give us comfort. But there are exciting new models. We can see the contours of new models of how we inform ourselves as a society emerging. Film, television, radio, the music industry are all being transformed. What is a movie is changing as you get to be part of the movie. How movies are shown and distributed is changing very fundamentally. You know, cable television in the United States is declining, and young people, 10 years from now, no one will watch cable TV or satellite TV. Television is becoming a cool new app on the internet. That's what TV is becoming. The music industry is collapsing, and it's being rebuilt by a whole new set of players. It's collapsing because it didn't understand what I'm telling you today. The internet was the best thing to ever happen to the music industry. It dropped transaction and collaboration costs. All they had to do was change music from being a product to becoming a service. Everyone in this room will pay the equivalent of $3 per month for access to any song ever recorded, streamed to you on your mobile device, into your car, into your home stereo, your theater, your office, streaming, internet audio. No one will steal music. Why would you take possession of the song if you can listen to any song at any time with a whole bunch of value-added services? But the music industry took a legal solution to a business model disruption. And now this great industry is collapsing. We need to reinvent education. Every child in Korea should have a laptop connected to a high-speed network in the classroom. That's what they're doing in Portugal. And this is not about technology. It's a change in the relationship between students and teachers in the learning process, whereby teachers stop lecturing and become the curators. They customize a learning experience for individuals. They enable people and young people to learn through collaboration. Now in Korea, you have young people that perform well on tests. Is that what we need? A generation of students that perform well on tests? This new global economy, we need students who can think, who are creative, who can solve problems, who can put things in context, who know how to collaborate. Could Korea provide leadership for the reinvention of the model of pedagogy? Korea is providing leadership for the reinvention of the city. We have these industrial age cities that don't work anymore. Well, something like Songdo City is an extraordinary, creating a smart, connected city. This is great leadership that the rest of the world is following. How about democracy? We have an industrial age model. You vote, I rule. Could we move to a second era of democracy based on, rather than just citizens being inert during elections, based on a culture of public deliberation and of active citizenship? Of course, we still need to vote in elections for our representatives, but we could go beyond that through digital brainstorms. That's a 3-day conversation of the entire population of Korea. Your president could conduct a 3-day conversation. Challenges, electronic town halls. There are all kinds of new techniques to reinvent the model of democracy to engage citizens. Global problem solving is another topic as well. Our old institutions, the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, the WTO, the G8, the G20, APEC, these are institutions that came out of a previous period in human history. Could Korea participate in the creation of the new model, new global multi-stakeholder networks that are not simply based on states? Now I could go on and on. Healthcare. Every baby born in Korea should get a website. And it's half electronic healthcare record, and it's half a social network for health where people can collaborate in their own healthcare. So, this is not just a time of building strong economies, and no one can do that sustainably unless the global economy is fixed. It's a time of the transformation of our institutions, of finding new solutions for our connected planet, and we need leadership to be able to do this. We're at a turning point in the world today. Door number 1 and door number 2. Door number 1 is the old industrial ways of doing things. Can you show the world a new door? To close, this is my guidebook for being able to do that. To close, Anthony Williams and I, towards the end of the book, started wondering, what is an age of collaborative intelligence, of network intelligence look like? And we'd studied thousands of organizations. And we thought maybe we can learn from nature. Kevin Kelly was speaking at this conference, and he's one of the people who probed this idea very early on. Well, bees come in a certain formation, sheep come in flocks, fish come in schools, starlings, the bird, come in something called a murmuration. It refers to the murmuring of the wings of the birds. And throughout the night, the starlings are out over a 20-mile radius throughout the day looking for food, and at night they come together and they create one of the most spectacular things in all of nature. And the murmuration has a function. Look at, there's a predator, a hawk, being chased away by the collective power of the birds. It defends the birds. It warms the birds up for the cold night ahead. There's leadership, but there's no one leader. They have a collaborative and collective model of leadership. And scientists that have studied this say they've never seen an accident. Now, is this some kind of fanciful analogy, or could we learn something from this? Well, what if we connected ourselves in this city, in this country, in this planet, through vast networks of glass and of air? And could we go beyond sharing information, sharing knowledge, to begin to share our intelligence? Could we create something that transcends an individual, some kind of consciousness? Well, if we could do that, we could solve some big problems. You know, the principles that I've been talking about today are the principles of this murmuration. It's a collaboration. There's a great openness. There's an interdependence. The birds understand they can't succeed unless the murmuration as a whole does. And there's a great integrity that gives the birds courage to take on a fearsome predator. You know, when I look at those kids today in Syria that are being shot in the Arab Spring, I see something like this. The Egyptian elections are on today. During the revolution, many people said Mubarak is too strong. He'll win. The kids will go home. And I knew that they wouldn't go home. They had to stay in there like these birds, because if they went home, Mubarak would have hunted them down and he would have killed them. Just like if this murmuration breaks up, those predators will have a field day. I look at this thing and I get great hope that this smaller, connected planet that our children inherit might be a better one. And that this age of networked intelligence can be an age where the promise of interconnectivity can be fulfilled and where we can avoid the danger. There's nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come. The time has come for collaboration. The time has come for the transformation of our civilization. And hopefully the time has come for Korea and for each of you to find that leader within you to change this country, and in doing so, to change the world. Thank you very much.